Now, Pavarotti was a good friend.
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. As a disclaimer, this channel is for entertainment purposes. These are my opinions, not here to slander anyone. Let's get right into it, folks, because, of course, I checked the Idaho court docs register to see if we have a ruling on change of venue yet. Of course, we don't. Now, there was a doc posted today, though, and it was the state's response to defendant's supplemental request for the 17th supplemental request for discovery. And we'll go through that here in just a minute. But I have to remind everybody, because we're going to unpack some things in this one, folks. Stuff is going to start getting real in this case, starting now. And here's why. Take a look at the date on your calendar today. You'll notice it says September the 6th, 2024. That means tomorrow, by reasons of deduction, will be September the 7th, 2024. Now, let me ask you, what happens on September the 7th, 2024? Do you remember? That's okay. That's why you have Pavarotti. Let me refresh your memory.
We're going to have a deadline of September 6th for discovery from the state. And Ms. Taylor, did you say beginning of January?
Yes.
Okay, January, give me a date.
9th.
9th. Okay, good.
That's right, folks. Tomorrow is the deadline for the state to provide all of the state's discovery to the defense in this case. Now, has the state provided all that discovery at this point? I highly doubt it. But they did post a response today, and again, we'll go through that here in a minute. But until we go through that, and until we know for sure what the state has provided the defense and what the defense is that we know about is still waiting on, well, we're going to hit that hard. Because let me tell you, if the state does not provide these items requested by the defense by tomorrow, then that means there needs to be an emergency hearing scheduled to discuss discovery that has not been turned over to the defense. And since it's past the deadline, it's time for Judge John Judge to grow a pair, and I mean a big old pair, because he's going to have to issue what's called sanctions if those discovery items have not been turned over to the defense. But for me to go through and actually locate that little snippet of that court hearing is not easy, let me tell you, because there's been many hearings, and it's hard to remember exactly which hearing you hear that stuff in and where at in the hearing, because the hearings are long. So it takes a while to go through and actually listen to several hearings just to find that one spot for you. And doing that, though, that hearing was on February 28, 2024, in case you're wondering. That was also the hearing that other things were brought up. So, of course, as I went through that, I went ahead and took a couple of more snippets for you, because I watched a video, again, of Jules of the Trades earlier, and she was discussing that section of the IGG documentation where it talks about them getting the S&P sample from the K-bar knife, not the K-bar knife sheath. And let me say this before I go any further. In my last video where I was discussing the information that Jules of the Trades had provided, I made the statement that Jules was a smart cookie. Okay, and that was just the way that I talk when I'm complimenting somebody. I realize that could be taken in a negative manner, so let me retract that statement, because I have nothing but respect for Jules of the Trades, or for Jules. Jules of True Crime Reactions, I believe it's called. And so let me say this, Jules is not just a smart cookie. She is a smart, independent woman with a degree, and she's very good at what she does. So That is my statement to Jules. So if any took any disrespect from the smart cookie comment, I do apologize to you, because you are very smart. So with that being said, though, they were discussing that point in that document, and it's funny, during the section of this hearing where they were actually discussing the IGG, that was the section of the hearing where the judge mistakenly referred to Mr. Kohberger as Mr. Kohberger. And what's weird is when I watch that, I mean, it's almost like a voiceover. And we know it happened in real time because we supposedly watched it in real time. But it makes me think, after just studying that thing over and over, are they even showing these hearings in real time? Or is there a delay for them to try to scrub some things? Because something was weird by the way he said Kohberger. And that wasn't the first time he started to do that in that hearing. He started to do it one other time and caught himself. He said Kohberger. And then he came right out with Kohberger. Let me show you.
Okay, that's going to be helpful to Mr. Kohberger. You may remember a few hearings in the past that the state from the very beginning said there was no, that played no I don't know how to even, it wasn't, when I asked them in the hearing, that did you use the IGG, any of the information at the IGG to get the warrant, to get Mr. Kohberger's DNA?
Okay, now the main point I wanted to make is, as he was discussing that, you heard the judge say that he was referring to previous hearings on the IGG where he asked the investigators specifically on the stand, and we're not privy to those hearings, those were all closed. But he asked the investigators specifically on the stand if you used the IGG in getting the warrant for Mr. Kohberger. And I'm wondering if that wasn't just a slip of the tongue. I'm wondering if he was making the statement. I asked him, did you use the IGG to get the warrant for Mr. Kohberger? And then they went back and scrubbed in Kohberger later in that to try to save it. Because that brings up a whole nother can of worms, opens another can of worms. I mean, did they use the IGG to get to Brent Kohberger and get his warrant and went in and annihilated him and then got a K-bar knife and then used the K-bar knife to develop an SMP profile that they supposedly matched to Kohberger off of the knife? I mean, is that possible? Is that what we're dealing with here? Is that part of the secrecy in this case? Anything is possible at this point, folks. But just weird. Just weird when you think about it like that. It convolutes everything.
To Mr. Kohberger. To Mr. Kohberger. To Mr. Kohberger. Mr. Kohberger's. Mr. Kohberger's. Mr. Kohberger's.
But back to what we're discussing, though. Tomorrow will be in the deadline for the state to provide the defense's discovery. So let's go through a list of those items that we know about that the state has not provided the defense in the discovery process. And one of those things is very important and should have been provided on day one because it's in the PCA. They most certainly, Mowry used it in the grand jury hearing, as he stated on the stand, as part of the evidence that indicted Bryan Kohberger, and that was the historical cast data of his cell phone and that cast data report. And let me refresh your memory with this part of the hearing.
What I'm talking about, though, is the cast report, the drive testing information.
Cast report meaning the identification of the particular car.
That is the cell tower information.
I'm with you.
So,
First and foremost, we're talking about the cast report, which the defense needs to complete their alibi. And we're going to go into this one in more detail here in just a few minutes. The second one you heard her mention was the drive test data. that Cy Ray needs to complete his report on the historical cast data. Then we need the IgG, because as we've learned, investigation into the IgG may have determined the outcome of the STR DNA profile match. Then we have those 6 missing videos from businesses on Main Street in Moscow that could prove that the Alondra is not Bryan Kohberger's Alondra. And then last, we have all the other sealed discovery requests that we do not have access to, but we know that they have to do with confidential informants. Now, we know that the prosecution has turned over some discovery items. And again, there was a court doc that was posted today, and we're going to take a brief look at it right now. Okay, so we can see here on September 4th, which was yesterday at 3:07 p.m., the Latah County prosecutors have filed this response, state's response to the supplemental responses to defendants' request for discovery. Now, as it goes through, it's almost impossible to decipher because they're just going to list the exhibits that they've attached, and they're going to list the requests that we're asking for those exhibits. So we can assume that some of the information they've requested has been given over based on this. Now, it won't let us see what all this is. Hopefully somebody will shed a light on, what was turned over and what the defense has now at some point. And you can see it talks about the defendant's 17th supplemental request. The state notes it's previously complied with the defendant's request, and the state incorporates the following responses as fully set forth at this point. And they're just citing their previous responses to the request for discovery. So it's quite possible that they haven't turned over very much more, and they're just citing previous responses, and the judge just never rules on anything. So all these are kind of hanging out there. The defense requests it, the state gives a response while they can't produce it, and then the judge does nothing. So, and it lists all of these responses to the defense's request. And then you'll see down here it says the state has and will continue to provide discovery in accordance with Idaho Criminal Rule 16 and applicable law, and reserves any and all objections thereunder. Dated this 4th day of September 2024. But not so fast, Miss Representative of the state, Ashley Jennings. Not so fast. The state has and will continue to provide discovery. Well, you got till tomorrow to will continue to provide discovery. And if that discovery isn't provided to the defense by tomorrow, like the judge set a deadline in court in February, this is September, if that discovery is not turned over to the defense by tomorrow, then there's no more of this will continue to provide discovery stuff. The judge has to make rulings on the discovery, on the requests, on the state's responses, and then whatever discovery the defense doesn't have that the state acknowledges that they should have, the judge must rule and must impose sanctions. It's time. There's no more time. We've all been patiently waiting for this, and now that date has finally arrived. Now, where are the consequences to the state's actions? Now, folks, all this is very important, and it's very important in many different ways, but there's one specific way that's very important to all of us who are following this case, and I mean all of us. The people on the fence, the people that think Kohberger's innocent, the people that think he's guilty, the families, everybody has been waiting on this last thing, this last thing, and that is the complete alibi statement from Bryan Kohberger on the night of the atrocity that has never been submitted because, as we learned earlier, the state has not given the final cast report. And the defense has made it clear that they're not going to submit the final alibi statement until they have the final cast report. And this goes back all the way to that exact same hearing where they started arguing on the alibi. This is going to be an extended clip, but please pay attention to it.
There's been an ongoing discussion beginning most recently with the state's request for scheduling order, and I believe Ms. Taylor briefly addressed it at the last hearing. There's been an ongoing discussion about the alibi deadline, and the state is asking the court to either limit the defendant to presenting evidence about the disclosure that he made related to the alibi, which was that he was driving around the night of the homicides, but not allowing any further discussion or evidence of an alibi, given the amount of time that has passed since the state requested that alibi disclosure. Alternatively, since it was in the court's scheduling order initially prior to the trial getting vacated, we would ask the court to set a 10-day deadline now, because that is consistent with the alibi statute. The state does not believe it is appropriate to tie the alibi to the jury trial date in this case. The statute that sets forth that 10-day timeline is completely separate from Rule 16 and other discovery deadlines through the litigation process. I think at this point, there has been so much time that has passed, and it has frankly causes the state great alarm that the defense is discussing calling upwards of 400 witnesses during the innocence phase when we don't have, potentially don't have a full alibi disclosure. And when you look at cases regarding appeals from issues that arise during alibis that come up at trial, these cases are all defendants appealing a conviction because the state doesn't get a second chance. If the state gets ambushed at trial, that's it for us. We're asking the court to hold the defendant to a fair alibi deadline, and I think that the time has come. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Beatty. Well, my understanding was that was it, but I may be wrong. Ms. Taylor.
No. When the court vacated the trial setting, the court vacated all of the deadlines, including the alibi deadline. That wasn't carved out as one that was still held through when the court vacated the rest of its scheduling order. So I don't think that we're foreclosed from that. The court also has the ability to give an extension besides the limited time by statute. In this case, it's more than Bryan was just driving around. We have let the state and the court know that we expect that will be supported by expert testimony and by cross-examination of the state's experts. I need their full cast report and the rest of the discovery related to that before I can say more about that. So to tie me to a deadline when I don't have the rest of the discovery that I've been waiting for that would relate to that will mean that I will be back asking the court to reopen it. My expert can't finish until I get the rest of the discovery as well.
And the discovery you're talking about is a video of the car?
No.
What do you
So the video that we talk about is one that I think the state's going to use in its case that I don't have full video on, that I'm not talking about any video of Bryan's car. When I'm talking about an alibi defense, unless there's video that shows it elsewhere that I haven't gotten to yet, which may be possible given the fact that there's a lot I haven't seen yet. What I'm talking about though is the cast report, the drive testing information.
Cast report meaning the identification of the particular car.
That is the cell tower information.
I'm with you.
So what that is going to show and what the drive testing data is going to show and what other reports related to that are going to be things that my expert needs to finish our investigation and things that I need to formulate my cross-examination against the state's expert. So when I'm telling you that I'm going to do those things in alibi, I can't tell you more than that right now, but that's how we're going to support Bryan's alibi, that he was out driving that night.
Okay, so you're saying that you have not received the cell tower reports?
I have some data. some cell tower data, some phone record data. I have a draft of a cast report. The most recent information I have cast is the FBI doing their work. The most recent information I have is that on March 31st, they expect for that report to be done through the peer review process. So I may get it a month from now. I need to get it to my expert to digest. There's materials that support their report that I don't have full disclosure of. And the state's aware of it. I think they're working on it. And maybe they're on that drive that I'll pick up today, but I haven't had them yet.
So you expect to get that in mid-March?
I expect to get their report after March 31st after it's done. The supporting data, I'm not sure when it's coming. They tell me it's coming.
Okay, I'm gonna kick it back to the state.
Your Honor, I guess I'm a little confused.
Now, after that hearing, of course, there was the April 17th deadline for them to submit the alibi, and the defense submitted another partial alibi with a little bit more information. The state threw a fit, and I've been through this in several videos. The state threw a fit, requested that the judge not allow any more alibi statements from the defense, and even went as far as to say if the judge did allow it, that the state would then put together a list of witnesses that would place the defendant at the scene. Folks, that's how you know that there's confidential informants, and they could be turned into cooperating witnesses from that statement from the prosecutor right there. But the judge never ruled. Never ruled. So we've been waiting. Like the defense has said all along, when they get the final cast report, they will submit the alibi, the complete alibi statement. Well, time's up, prosecution. Tomorrow's September 7th. Where is that final report on the cast so that the defense can finally post the complete alibi? No more waiting. Time's up. Folks, all this is going to happen before any of those hearings on motions to suppress or motions in limine. We're about to see some fireworks happening in this case. So we're going to have to be diligent and pay attention. Once that change of venue ruling comes out, then all the other things are going to start to fall. And it's about to heat up. And we've got to stay on them to make sure that this thing heats up. No more dragging your feet, John Judge. You set deadlines, there has to be consequences to not meeting those deadlines. And those consequences need to be stiff in a death penalty case, and you know it. But that's all I'm going to talk about in this video, folks. But I just want everybody to be aware of the discovery items that weren't turned over. Tomorrow's the deadline. So we're waiting on the change of venue. We're waiting on the discovery items to see if they were turned over so that we can get the final alibi statement and we can finally know where Kohberger was the night of the atrocity. And I know we've been waiting for that one. There may even be more information in that alibi statement about who his corroborating parties will be on his whereabouts. That's why I can't wait to see the dang thing. Please like and subscribe to this channel. Post your comments, your thoughts, even your criticisms. Until next time, Pavarotti's out.